got my pencils. I'm ready to draw, so let's let the magic begin.
Welcome, friends. Let's grab a pencil and we'll draw again. We'll make some magic and it all begins right here with me and you. From my lighthouse studio at Pencil Point, USA. Together we can change the world in oh so many ways. Let's start today.
Hi everybody, and welcome to today's show. Today I want to explore a mixed medium style of illustration using my number 2 pencil, a flare pen, and the magic wand of drawing. Let's go to the drawing board and explore the texture of wood grain in a natural setting. Let's go make it happen. I have got sketched out in this little horizontal rectangle here, a fence post, a couple of little cross rails that go to it, some rocks and grass, and a little split tree back here in the background. I'm going to take a felt tip marker, now you can use any size of felt tip marker you want, and lay down all my base lines before we add some of our shading. Starting on the post itself, rugged old fence post, so it doesn't have to be perfectly straight. Let that hand wiggle a little bit. And up top it's got a squashed little top there where they've pounded into the ground. Down to the ground there, doesn't have to be straight, put a little wiggle in it. I'm not going to draw a line down here at the bottom. I don't want to plant that into the ground with a harsh horizontal line because that'll take away the cool grass effect I want to add in just a moment. Let's add our 2 cross pieces here. A little bit straighter because they're actually hand-cut wooden planks. They don't have to be perfect. This fence has been out here for a long time. Now let's begin adding some wood grain techniques. The first thing I always like to do is add a couple of knot holes. There's one. Oh, maybe here's one here. I'm going to go horizontally with one there and maybe one right there. Let's make it a little bit bigger one. Now to draw wood grain, I'm going to go to the point of the marker. If you have a very fine tip, it works really well. So I'm going to begin drawing some straight, not perfectly straight, but little lines straight up and down this post. But watch what happens here. I'm not going to go all the way down. Look how it curves. I learned to draw wood grain by actually taking 2x4s and looking at the pattern of wood grain on them and trying to make the pencil and the pens copy that effect. So this will be your foundation of drawing really cool wood grain. Grab a piece of wood and you'll probably discover some wonderful textures that we're not covering right now. But look how I'm going right down it. Look how they're wiggling. Maybe this one's a little closer. Maybe we can see just the hint of one there. Ooh, look how it picks up around it. Curves still a little bit around that knot hole. Got another knot hole coming, so watch this. Come down. Boom, go around it. Detour all the way around it. Again. See how each line's a little different. Now this one's a little bit straighter than the other two. Again here, maybe it gets a little closer at the bottom, then wide again. Cool thing about wood grain is there's so many various styles and textures you can add that all kind of follow this wonderful little format. Subtle little changes you can add because every style of wood has a little bit different texture. Like these planks are going to be a little bit straighter cut, and we're going to be working horizontally now. Look at that little cool effect there. Now, around the knot hole, all the way over. Another line here picks up. Thin one here. Ooh, maybe there's just a little round one in there. Go around it. And all the way over. Maybe this goes there. 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 Maybe it comes down to here. The key to drawing wood grain is to simply make them all a little bit different. That's the wonderful thing about the textures of nature. It does vary in every little thing. Trees, grass. It's hard to go wrong. Now let's make this one a little different. All the way over. Curve it. Whoop, there we go. Right at it, right at it, right at it. Go curve around it. Look at that little squiggle. That's okay. See, that's going to work. Look at that. Copy it. Woodgrain does that kind of crazy stuff. Look at that. All the way over. And just a little bit of this side. Now back in the background, I've got a layer here, a tree, a layer of clouds, and some foreground grass. Let's go back to the very back. I want to start with my layer of cloud technique. We're using the pen. And all I'm drawing is what looks like connecting lumps and scoops of ice cream. Look at that. Small, small, medium size. Change my angle just a little, teeny one. Oh, maybe a big scoop there. Little one, little one, little one. Big one. Some medium-sized ones, and then I'm out. Remember, try not to fall into a pattern. And in this case, like a cloud, you don't want to just lump it like this or draw mountains like this. That pattern is unrealistic. Nature doesn't grow like a man-made product, like a fence post being perfectly positioned. When it comes to man-made objects, positioning them exact is always a good thing. But clouds and mountains and trees, it's really a wonderful chaos to nature that we try to capture with our pen and pencil. Let's go to this little forked tree I've got. Starting at its roots, work on my way up. Just going to disappear to the top. I'm going to come back down because it's got a really cool little fork in the tree right there. Look at that curve. Pick it up there. And the second little split off here is just a touch smaller. That's why I broke that cloud right there. Now, even this tree would have a cool little knot hole there, maybe one right there. That's where these little knot holes come from. It's from the big trees. Now again, I'm not going to draw all the root structures at the base of this because some really cool grass, maybe a couple old flowers, are going to cover that gnarly little root system that goes down into the ground. Let's go back down to the very base of this front post where I've got some rocks and some grass, and I want to start laying down at least the general pattern of my rocks. Rocks, like nature, like trees, vary in size and shape. So don't hesitate to let that pen squiggle and wiggle just a little bit randomly and see what happens. Now let's begin laying down the hint of our grass. Just look, I'm just very lightly laying down some hints of what I want. Now I think I'm ready to begin shading and detailing this little sketch. I see one more little line. Back here in the background, I've got my back plane, or the very back of my middle ground. Background, middle ground, and this fence being foreground. I want to hint to that layer, or that plane, in my drawing. Maybe there's a boulder here and here. And just let that disappear. Now, let's begin laying down, with our number 2 pencil and our magic wand, some really cool shading techniques on top of this ink. This is really cool effect. I love to use it because they just complement each other so well. Let's start up underneath the pounded top of our wooden post. I always like to start with that little shadow right on top of the ink. Now let's assume our light today is coming from the top right, which is going to cast a shadow. Watch this. Zip. Now, this is a round post. The shadow isn't going to be laid just flat upon it, or it won't look three-dimensional. Let's go with a contour shading. Let's curve our shadow by curving our pencil. Look at this. Whew. Whew. That's contour shading. Follow the shape of the object, and it helps make it look a lot more rounding. Now I can take my finger and soften that down a little bit. I want it really dark up under here. And you can still see the ink lines underneath this pencil. It's a really cool effect. If I'd have done the pencil first, it would have still worked, but I love to cast shadows on top of my finished preliminary work. Shadows are always the last thing I like to add because I do all the detail, and sometimes a really dark shadow could cover something I spent a long time on, but real shadows need to be drawn realistically, even in a pen and ink drawing. Now let's shadow this side of this vertical post. I'm going to allow just a touch of reflective light or white light that does tend to wrap around rounding objects. It's called reflective light line. And I'm going to work my way down. Don't worry about the wood grain It's going to be there waiting for me. I'm just going to concentrate on my shading from dark, curving it to light. And I like to work in little swirls. Now, I can take the finger of the magic wand and blend that in. Look at, I'm still curving, but look at that wonderful dark to light transition. That's what shading is. How gracefully can you go from black to that soft white is realistic shading, because light really is that subtle. Remember, the brighter the light, the harsher the shadow. If this was a really harsh 12 o'clock afternoon thing, I may bolden that shadow just a touch. Brighter the light, darker the shadow. And the closer your object is to the light source, in this case, if I put a lamp right here, the closer that light source is, the harsher the shadow would be as well. That, again, is what I like to call the law of light. Taking my finger and softening that down. Now, here's a really cool technique. This is three-dimensional shading. See these little fence posts I've got? Watch what they're going to do. They're not going to lay a flat shadow. Remember, this is a round, rustic post. Watch it curve. Boom, boom. Starting there, curve that shadow. It's going to go right into that other shadow, soften it down with my finger. Same thing here. That angle dictates where my sun is coming from. The angle of the shadow dictates the angle of the incoming light. Again, that falls under our law of light. And you know that law never changes. Once you understand that, you never really have to think about it. So everyone says, TJ, man, shading is really tough. You know, in my opinion, shading is the easiest thing of drawing because that law of light never changes. And how gracefully you can do these dark to light techniques, you know, that just gets better. It never gets worse. Once you understand the law of light, it's like riding a bicycle. You can just ride on, and it really becomes what I like to call second nature. Now, if our sun is beaming down here and casting a shadow, these cool little stripes, I believe these planks are going to be in shadow. So I'm going to just take my pencil, and you can really lay down some various pressures. Look at that. I'm changing my pressure. Because all that's going to do is make some of these cool little wood grain techniques work to my advantage. Take my finger. Let some of it be lighter, some of it darker. Man, that's the cool thing about wood and the chaos of nature. If I'd have gone really black, I'd have buried all of those wood grain lines. And this looks like it'd be about a 11 o'clock in the morning type of drawing. The shadows aren't too harsh yet. Or it could be around 4 o'clock in the afternoon or 5 o'clock where the sun is just starting to set. And it's not straight up and beaming down. There's a little bit of an angle there. You can see that. And look how a little bit of that reflective light's working for me here. All right, let's go to the top of my rustic post. And all I'm doing is creating a little bit of texture. Remember my light, so I'm going to lighten up this texture as I hit that sunlight. But it's going to be a little darker over here. Maybe just a touch darker on that side. Simple as that. Now let's go down using the same law of light down to our rocks down here behind the post. I'll always, in everything I shade, start in the darkest shadows first. And the cool thing about a rock, it's really hard to go wrong, but you got to do two things. Concentrate on the dark to light technique, but concentrate on the texture of the rock. Rocks aren't all smooth, some are. It'd be exactly like shading a smooth round ball. But most rocks have been out there and they're weathered, and we want to try to capture that little weathered texture to a stone. And the first lines that we drew help automatically dictate some of the cool stuff I'm going to add. I can't plan it. I didn't know exactly how this line was going to be drawn. But that little lump and that little lump there are telling me as I'm sitting here looking at it, TJ, you know, there may be a little crack or a groove there, and if I'd have jagged it up even more, it may have been even a more textured boulder. That's the randomness of drawing rocks, especially when you make them up. I learned to draw these types of rocks by sitting on the rivers and drawing all the waterfalls and the rocks around them, and I began to fill my drawing file with how-tos. And that's what I'm sharing with you now. You will find a cool way of doing it. Take your wonderful artistic skill out into the real world and discover all these wonderful magical things that are happening out there, and put them through that pencil. And you know, it almost like it comes out of that pencil all by itself. That's what I mean by the magic of drawing. It really does become second nature. And watching this graphite to this day pour out of this pencil is still the greatest thrill of my life. Now, there's two little rocks. See how simple? Let's go back to this cool little split tree now, understanding that it's not going to be as wood-grainy as this because it's going to have bark on it. So I want to create some really cool textured bark on this tree by allowing the side of this pencil to work to my advantage. Again, concentrating in the dark areas first. Again, allowing that little reflective light where light can actually wrap around rounding objects. And look how I'm going to jiggle this pencil. Kind of working in little circles, little donuts, darker on the side. And I kind of skip a little area. So I'm allowing black, white, black. Go around that little knot hole, around the knot hole. Skip a little area, hinting to some of the roots going down to the ground. Blending them out, flattening them out as I work my way into the grass. And look how I'm varying the thickness of these lines. Again here. Maybe that one's thin there. Oh yeah, it gets thick again. Whoop, gets thin. Whoop, gets thick. That's the fun part about it. Trees can actually be really exciting to draw. Everyone's new. Everyone's different. They have their own little flavor and texture to them. Oh, let's see, another little root shadow there. Now light is going to begin hitting this side of the tree. Just like that. Now, this is going to be shadowed down in here. Remember my little reflective line? So here we go, here we go. Look at it. Now, if I use the point of the pencil to draw all these shadows, well, we'd still be working on the first part of the stump or the post. So try to get used to using the side. I know it looks kind of weird the way I hold my pencil on the side, but during the world record, drawing for so many years on a big vertical surface, I just kind of got used to holding that pencil flat up against my board and working up and down on a vertical surface. In my room here at the lighthouse, when I'm just drawing for me, I actually have a board in my lap and I draw just like you would any other time, drawing with the drawing paper down. But drawing vertically like this forces me to lay that hand up against the board. But you know, I had to learn to do that. And now I just love it. It became part of my style, and that's okay. But it does enable me to, look at that, to use the side of my pencil, I think actually better, because I don't have to worry about holding my drawing board. I can just lay my pencil to the side and go all over this thing and just go crazy with it. Now I'm going to take the magic wand and blend in some shadows on the shady side of the tree. Look at that. Now that is cool. Shading is the most thrilling part of artwork. In my opinion, again, it's the simplest. But you know, it sure makes people go, man, how long did it take to draw that, TJ? Well, you just saw, just a matter of seconds, turn something that's simple line art into a wonderfully shaded, textured, believable landscape. That's the magic of drawing right there. Well, now, while I've got the magic wand, just to emphasize my layering of clouds, I'm going to put just a little swirling shadow back behind those little scoops of ice cream. And my finger can do that. Matter of fact, see, I've got a lot of graphite still on my finger. I'm just going to paint with it. Mrs. TJ tells me if you cut my finger, I'll bleed graphite, and I think she's right. That's because I just shade with that finger all the time. Don't worry about maybe some of the oil of your finger getting on your board. I've drawn a good drawing paper, good acid-free papers, or good drawing surfaces here. Don't you worry about it. You use whatever tool you have handy, and the finger is a wonderful and magical drawing tool. Now, there's a couple little stones back here, and this line of grass, I'm going to concentrate on them now. Remember my light source? Jagged old weather stone, but it is further back. I can't quite see as much detail in it as I could the foreground stones. Oh, let's draw some grass right here. Look at this. Now remember, texture drawing means you may have to follow the lay of the land. So grass grows up like this, and I like to shade it in what I like to call sprigs of grass. And that means quick strokes up, what I'm actually doing, if I slowed that process down, you'd see my pencil going like that. Even though I can do it by taking it off, I'm creating a thick to thin line by doing this quick stroke technique. Go right over everything. Use the finger. Maybe this tree casts a little shadow. Watch this. Remember light source? Shadows fall opposite. Incoming light, shadows fall opposite. Let's put a little grass here. Darker grass because this is the shady side of the tree, so I can bear down a little bit harder. Now let's follow that all the way over. Just laying down a nice, soft, subtle gray tone on my middle ground. Little shadow from these boulders here. Soften it down with a finger. Help create some shading and depth on my middle ground. Soften it down with a finger. Now you can add all kinds of cool clouds, maybe another layer of trees back in the back. But let's go down to the base of my stump, or base of the post, and lay down two different kinds of grass techniques. One, I'm going to use the back to the marker and the flare pen. Lay down some quick strokes. Look at that. I'm going to do the same thing on top of that with my pencil to lay down all the cool various gray tones that I need burying inside of that create all the shadows and depth. But the closer I get to my foreground or closer to my eyeball in a work of art, I tend to get darker. I can use a lighter number 2 pencil on the background, work my way up to this foreground and go to that good 6B, a good dark marker, and so I can bear down a little harder here. Remember, foreground means more detail, bolder works of art, and helps create the illusion of depth and distance in our work. Now, take the side of that number 2 pencil, quick stroke up, darker in the dark areas, darker in the dark areas. We'll lay a shadow with this fence post here in a minute. Look at that. That's the sunny side, so I can allow a little bit more of my white paper and my whiteboard to shine through. Over here, I'm going to try to fill that in dark. Use my finger to darken it even more. Look at that. Shadows create depth. 3 things create wonderful dimension in our work of art: height and width. And to create that wonderful layer of depth, the 3rd dimension in our work, lights and shadows are the magic. Last thing I want to add is a nice little shadow. Incoming light, falling shadow. Darker down at the base, darker down at the base. Drag that shadow out. Hear it bearing down, hear it bearing down. I've been known to break a lot of lead and cause my crew to run hiding because I do tend to bear down, but that's okay. I want you to bear down as hard as you want. See how that's shaped? Obviously, we're on some curved ground, and that's contour shading. Million ways to add texture to your artwork. Using markers, using your finger, using the flare pen, using the smudging stump. All kinds of tools are there to help you create the wonderful and chaotic textures of nature.
Since today's show is a study in wood grain, I thought I'd share with you scene 19 of my Guinness World Record mural, One World, One Song. In this 8-foot high by 12-foot long scene I call Marshall Dillo and the Sidewinders, I drew some serious wood grain detail throughout this dusty old western town. Varying the direction, textures, and tonal value of Sidewinder's lumber allow me to create enough contrast in the buildings to keep such a large area of wood grain interesting. Just like I did in today's show, I began scene 19 with a preliminary sketch and began laying out all the weathered planks I'd be detailing with Woodgrain. These rugged old posts are just like the one we drew in today's show, but they're just a lot bigger. Just after I drew the details on this old stump, somebody decided to move in. Even my cuddly singing cowboy Marshall Dillo plays this cool little guitar while sitting on a wooden bucket, drawn with all the techniques we've used today. Well, I hope you enjoyed today's study in Woodgrain. Remember, the more you practice, the better you'll get.
So in the meantime, follow that creative dreamer and draw, draw, draw. So long, everybody. Let's take a look at what we'll be drawing in our next show. Now, everything in the world, even when you draw people and even when you draw cartoons, begins with a foundational sketch. I call these geoheads. The basic geometric shapes are the foundation for almost everything we draw. Using again the side of the pencil. Now the cylinder guy, he's going to obviously have an elongated or a stretched head. Clean out the geo cylinder. Every one of these is brand new. I don't know where they're going to go either, and you know that's kind of the thrill. I just kind of hang on like you guys. I don't know where I'm going, but it's going to turn out like somebody. One more geo head to go. Now this is a cone. So we're going to draw a cone head. Look at that. And see, let it break apart. Those little white lines right there, man, they work for it. See you next time, and remember, life is art. So draw something beautiful. So long, everybody.
To order a DVD copy of today's show or any of the TJ's Magic of Drawing series, visit TJ's website at magicofdrawing.com.